community meeting here for the Fulshear, Simonton, Western Lakes area. We have a number of people up here, and he's slowly, very slowly making his way down. Congressman Pete Olson, who is, wave your hand, Pete, there he is over here, is coming. We have Dr. John Zerwas, who is your state representative. He is also chair of the appropriations. He's also been he's been doing very yeoman's work here on this effort and helping this region and this area, recover. He'll be speaking a little later. We have Sheriff Troy Dells. Where are you at, Sheriff? How come you're not up here, Troy? Well, Troy, you're the guy wearing the bulletproof vest. We need you up here standing in front of us. Troy Dells is our sheriff. I thought I saw Major Chad Norville. Major, are you here someplace? He's not here. Okay. We have our Road and Bridge Commissioner, Mark Grant. Mark, wave your hand. There he is. He's going to be speaking with regard to debris pickup. We have Mark Vogler, who is our drainage engineer. Mark will tell you a little bit about the river, the drainage system, etc. We have John Burry with Tetra Tech. John, wave your hand. John is the Fort Bend County's outside consultant on our recovery. I believe we have Mike Jones with the Texas Division of Emergency Management. Mike, you here? Okay, he's down on the floor. He also is wearing a bulletproof vest. That's the reason he's sitting down there instead of up here. We have our Fire Marshal, Mark Flathouse. Mark, raise your hand. We have a number of FEMA executives here, and the only one I actually have written down here is Mark Lucan. Mark, are you here? For the National Flood Insurance Program. He didn't make it?
He's on his way.
He's on his way. Okay. He hasn't made it yet. I'll let the other FEMA executives introduce themselves when we get to that point. And in addition, we have Paula Gibson didn't make it from Lois Coker's office. Senator Coker's, of the 21 counties she covers, 19 of them were hit, and she got, her county's got the worst of it, the Rockport area, and she is down there today. We have Rick Stagley, who is our Chief Assistant Engineer for the Engineering Department. Somewhere around here we have our, is Lou Boudreaux here? Lou, are you? Yeah, there he is, okay. I can't see that far, I'm an old man, Lou. Lou Boudreaux, who's the mayor of Simonton. I know I saw C.J. Snipes, who's the city manager of Fulshear, C.J. Also saw Tricia Krennick. Tricia, are you here someplace? There she is on the front row. Who am I missing? The mayor of Fulshear. I'm sorry. I didn't see you down there. Mr. Roberts, the mayor of Fulshear. Jeff Roberts. Have I missed anybody on the desk? Well, I'm sorry. My own constable, I forgot him. Wayne Thompson, Constable Precinct 3 is here. In addition, we have, I think we have the volunteers from St. Faustina Catholic Church, who is out in the foyer, who will assist with applications to FEMA and other things for those who need it. And Robert Machukas, where are you at? Robert has disappeared. Okay, he's in the back. Robert's Church, and it is Bayou, what? Bayou City Fellowship, and the website? BayouCityRelief.com if you need assistance in cleaning out your home. So we do have two organizations here that are volunteers that help you with that. In addition, we have our social service, we have our environmental health, our public health emergency preparedness, we have behavior health, and we have our Office of Emergency Management, and that is Jeff Braun. Jeff, raise your hand. You'll be hearing from him quite a bit. He's the guy with all the answers, I think. Now, have I missed anybody? We have handouts, and hopefully you pick some of them up that have key information on it with regard to our agencies, their contact information, etc., that you need to contact. The process that we're going to be going through here, our attempt here is to provide you with some basic information from FEMA, from the county, from our congressman, from our state rep, with regard to how the federal government and the state government and the local government is working toward helping you with the damage to your homes and the problems you have, both fixing your home as well as other financial needs that you have. We'll also have a brief explanation from our county drainage district and with regard to the drainage system out here and how it worked and how it didn't work so well. He'll be covering the water levels, the drainage performance, the creeks and flash flooding, slab elevation, and plat information. And with that, I'm going to ask both FEMA and I forgot to introduce the Small Business Administration gentleman, I forgot his name. I have it written down on the other sheet of paper in the other office. He'll come up and introduce himself. But FEMA and the SBA are going to come up and give you a brief overview of the financial benefits that are available to you, also how you can contact them. They'll give you the location of the recovery centers that we have 3 of them. One of them is actually in Simonton on 1489. They'll give you all that information. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to bring up the FEMA and SBA people. Guys, come up to the mic.
Sorry about that. Just clearing up, the insurance person is actually in the front row, and I didn't see that he was already here. So, good news, we have people we need to answer questions. My name is Juan Ayala. I am the External Affairs Advisor for Branch 2, which is handling 25 counties surrounding Harris County and in all directions, just not Harris County. We have folks here to talk about insurance, to talk about the Individual Assistance Program, but just wanted to, first of all, thank you for being here. Thank you for your patience. Let you know that we understand it's a very frustrating process. We have in the state of Texas alone over 800,000 people who have requested FEMA assistance. And so to get through that, it's not a one-size-fits-all program. It is based on each person's individual needs. So everyone has to be talked to one-on-one about what they need. And sorry, maybe I'm supposed to just introduce myself. But we've got some folks to answer FEMA-related questions as we get to it.
Good evening, I'm Effie Haynes. I'm with Individual Assistance. My program is I work with individuals on helping them. First of all, let me ask, how many of you have not registered? Are there any people in here have not registered? Okay, so 100% of you have registered. So I'm available at the end of this event if you have any issues on your that you need to go into your profile to change, if you have been inaccessible, if it shows anything like that. Also, if you have any questions about your assistance that you have applied, I heard that earlier today, so those are questions that I'll be glad to answer for you. Thank you. Oh, I couldn't see.
I'm sorry. Let me make certain that I go over the process here. We have we're going to be making presentations, explaining as much as we can, and when we get through with the explanations, we have cards. Where are my cards at, guys? We have cards that are outside for you to fill out for your questions. We also had asked that you submit your questions online ahead of time so that we could gather all that information and specifically answer the questions you have. Chris, are the cards to fill out outside? Okay, they're out in the lobby. If you want to grab one of those and fill it out, and we'll answer the questions. We have a lot of questions. They're almost all the same questions. We had over 600 questions submitted to us. The great majority of them actually were the same questions over and over again. So we're trying to condense this down so we get you the basic information with regard to specifics for your individual case. FEMA is going to give you some information with regard to who you contact. As I said, there are several recovery centers that you can go to. One of them is here in Simonton, and I have the address here someplace. It is 9703 FM 1489, which is essentially the community church that is on 1489. The Simonton Community Church, 1489 is where you can go to get most all of the information, most all of your questions answered with regard to the programs, financial assistance, etc., that are available to you through the federal government. So, with that, anyone else from FEMA? SBA? Small Business Administration.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Don Fikes. I'm a Public Information Officer with the Small Business Administration Disaster Assistance. And I'm sure some of you are familiar with our program, but I'll go over a couple of quick things. We make loans to homeowners, renters that have lost personal property, nonprofits, and of course businesses of all sizes. These are low interest, long-term loans. They're a good source of long-term recovery, and we urge everyone to apply. You may think you're not interested in a loan at this point, but it's an important part of the sequence of delivery of benefits. So we urge you to apply, get a decision from the SBA. That will help you make decisions about your future and how you want to handle that. We'd also want everyone to know that may have a current SBA disaster loan or even a regular SBA loan through our program. We've granted a 12-month deferment. That's an automatic deferment. So you should be receiving notice that no payments will be due on those loans for the next 12 months. And I'll be available for questions after this program, and a couple of my colleagues are here and would be glad to answer any of your individual questions. Thank you.
Larry Fordham, where are you at? There he is. Larry, would you like to explain the National Flood Insurance Program?
Actually, John Niels.
Okay, Mr. Neal will explain it.
And I will be available at the meeting.
Thank you.
My name is John Miles. I'm with the National Flood Insurance Program, part of FEMA. How many folks here have flood insurance? Okay. By and large, all of your policies will be actually written through the NFIP. They're serviced by about 20 different companies, State Farm, Prudential, a bunch of different companies, but the actual policy will probably be written by NFIP. The writing company, in other words, the folks you normally send your check to for your premium, are the folks who have primary responsibility for adjusting your loss, but because it's a federal program, we have an interest in it, we're monitoring what's going on. So if you have specific questions, the easiest thing to do is get a hold of your agent. If your agent can't answer your question or you're not happy with that, the same number that you use to sign up for FEMA benefits, the individual assistance, the 1-800-FEMA number, if you wait a minute, when you reach the number, go for option 2, and that will get you into the NFIP queue, and there are folks there who have hot computer screens who will know exactly what's going on with your claim. And they can answer questions specifically about your claim, and more importantly, if there's a problem, they can log it, and we track every individual problem and run it down to a final resolution. So there's an additional process for you if you're not really happy with the way things are going. Larry and I will be available after the general meeting for individual questions, and that's what we're doing.
For those who do not have flood insurance but flooded, what are their options?
From us,
Yes.
it drops back over to the individual assistance folks.
I'm sorry?
It drops back over to the individual assistance.
The individual assistance, okay. You want to explain briefly the individual assistance?
Yes. That's the other FEMA program.
Okay, I understand it's a FEMA program. There's a limit to the dollar amount.
What was the question?
Individual assistance.
The individual assistance.
Okay, individual assistance, I guess I want to take the mic off. With individual assistance, we have a max grant, and that grant is $33,300. Obviously, that's based on individual needs and the amount of damages that you have. Also, it's based on whether you're underinsured, uninsured, or underinsured. So that's one of the criterias, one of the grant programs that will be available for individuals. Also, you have rental assistance for individuals. Once you register with FEMA, they take your information and they determine your amount of damages, so you have that, and you also have TSA, the housing program, the hotel program.
Is that included in the 33.3?
The TSA program,
Does that go into, like, whatever you use if you're in temporary housing?
that's separate. Your rental assistance is taken out from the $33,300, but not your hotel amount. Also, if you, somebody had a question? She asked me if the TSA was part of it, the Transitional Shelter Assistance part, which is the part for the FEMA, as I said, FEMA does not duplicate benefits. So you have flood insurance.
Can we do this, sir? We have a lot of people here, and we're going to get to some questions. And if you will cover your specific question, because it's individual to you, to her, that way we can address it. If you fill it out, we'll answer the question directly. The bottom line currently is that one of the questions that have been asked of us is a potential buyout of property. That is something that's being worked on. Currently, Congress has to appropriate the funds for that. Congress then sends the money down to the state level, in which it's administered at the state level. Having said that, I'm going to now introduce our congressman and then our state representative, who are going to address specifically what Congress is working toward, what Congressman Olson is working toward with regard to getting additional financial services, financial funds here in the area to address these issues, and then Dr. Zerwas will address the issues from the state standpoint. So, Congressman.
How has D.C. responded to the worst hurricane ever, Hurricane Harvey? First of all, I have to talk about President Donald Trump. He's done something that hasn't been done in years. Our Governor Greg Abbott asked for a disaster declaration 2 days before Harvey hit. President Trump approved that declaration as the storm came ashore in Rockport. President Bush took 1 week to approve the Katrina Declaration of Disaster. President Obama took 2 weeks with Sandy. That money was here as the hurricane hit, and that money saved lives. In Congress, we passed a bill with Mr. Trump giving $15.8 billion to this region to recover from Harvey. That is a small amount. It'll go up much higher. but that gets FEMA started. It also honors Governor Abbott's request to get money for what's called CDBG grants, grants for housing. Because one thing we've committed to do is not have a repeat of the mobile homes that were terrible in Katrina. We want people in real homes with walls, apartments, some semblance of their normal life until they can get back in their own home. Now, there are two agencies that I control in DC, oversee. It's called FEMA and the SBA. They're here now. They're working hard for us. My role, before you can do anything with them, you have to fill out an application. Go to disasterassistance.gov. Disasterassistance.gov, G-O-V. It's basically a number that you can interact with FEMA. Without that number, they can't help you. Now, they'll try hard to help you, but sometimes they may fall short. And that's when I step in. It's my job to make sure they keep their word to you to get you back in your homes, your businesses, as soon as possible. To do that, I have to have a thing what's called a privacy release statement. I can't go to FEMA and ask a question about your case until you say it's okay. We have those here, my staff, my guy here, Ty, where's Ty Petty? He's right here. He's in charge here at home. In front of me is Tori McFarland. She helps out as well. Talk with them. At that point, I have one simple rule. If things go slow, bureaucratic delays kick in, I can be a nice guy. I can be friendly. I also have a baseball bat in my truck. And sometimes, if need be, I'll use that bat to make things happen for you as quickly as possible. I've been your congressman now for 9 years. And I've always been proud to have that role in your life, but never more proud these past 2 or more weeks. You all have been amazing. Example for the world of what people can do, neighbor taking care of neighbor, regardless of party, of religion, of ethnicity. We are Texas Fort Bend proud. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Congressman. Now, Dr. Zerwas on the state issues.
Thank you, Commissioner, and thank all y'all for coming out this afternoon to try to help us all understand clearly the specific circumstances that y'all have been burdened with and share with you some of the information that we have. I'd first like to commend Commissioner Meyers for his steadfastness during this very difficult time. His office has been just an incredible resource to all the constituents in Precinct 3, and I include myself in that as I flooded out myself with about a foot of water in my home and a bunch of cars that got flooded out, and so I got to tap into that personally myself. And so what I want to share with you is from the state perspective that I likewise recognize that Governor Abbott really pulled out all the stops in terms of preparing ourselves for this, positioning assets, having the National Guard readily available, and it did in fact turn out to be the worst case scenario that the forecasters were predicting out there. I don't think most of us thought that forecast was going to occur, but it did. And I think the fact that the state did respond with really unleashing all of the resources that it had readily available, and in concert with President Trump and our strong congressional delegation there, I think that from the immediate point of view, we as a state were positioned well. But like the Congressman said, truly this happened with relatively few incidents in terms of loss of life, although there was some. It was because neighbors reached out to neighbors, and people just said, what can I do to help you? I had those people reached out to me, and I likewise reached out to them. And it's just really a reflection, certainly, of Fort Bend County, the greater Houston area, and Texas in general. And I certainly am very proud of that, and that certainly was a great model for the country. The state has a number of things that it is positioned to do. As was already mentioned, there's a lot of conversation about how does the money from the federal government ultimately get to all of us who live in this flood-stricken area. And a lot of that will happen through the state. The monies will come down from the federal government in terms of the $8 billion that you heard that was authorized. That was really to help get FEMA up and going. But there will be billions of dollars more that will come down to affected communities in the form of community development block grants, CDBGs is what they're called, and they are directly focused on providing some mitigating solutions for future floods and things of that nature. There are also, some things that will happen in terms of being able to provide some living assistance and so forth. There's both short-term and long-term goals. The General Land Office will be very much positioned to help handle that. Our office is there for you, and so I know many of you know how to contact our office. Please feel free to reach out to us. As we all know, governments at any level are significant bureaucracies, and they can be very difficult to navigate. That's what our office is there for, is that if you're running up against a roadblock there and can't get across, let us help advise you on that and see if we can perhaps make it work a little bit better for you. So we will be there for you in that regard. I will limit my comments to just what perhaps responding to some of the questions that might be out there. They'll probably be similar to the ones that we had in an auditorium of about 2,000 people probably there at Cinco Ranch that had been similarly affected. A lot of those didn't have flood insurance. And this group looks like it's well represented by people that actually have had flood insurance. And so one thing I will just share with you, because there has been a pretty regular conversation with me about that, is what is the role of the rainy day fund or our savings account when we have this circumstance occur? The rainy day fund can only be mobilized or appropriated if the legislature authorizes it to do so. The governor does not have the ability to do that, and so we would have to convene a special session if the governor determined that it was necessary to tap into the rainy day fund. The governor solely determines whether there's a call for a special session, and he also solely determines what's on that call. And so that would have to come from his office. We have lots of communications with his office. He at this point feels that much of the needs that we have in the region can be handled by moving money back and forth between agencies. That's certainly the way that they deal with this, and they have full authority to do that. And sometimes a group called the Legislative Budget Board gets plugged into that, of which I sit as a member of that also. But I have, as many of you know, I have been an advocate of using the rainy day fund for purposes even outside of the circumstance we find ourselves in today. But I think that the fund has been nicknamed the Rainy Day Fund very appropriately for the circumstance we're in today, and that if there is any sliver of a sense that we need to tap into that, I'm going to continue to advocate that the governor call that special session so that we can in fact tap into that. It's a little bit murky as to how that money can be used and what it can be used for, but certainly it has always been in recent years framed as that's the savings account in the event that we have some epic disaster. Well, we have had that epic disaster not just based on the size of Texas, but for the entire nation. There has never been a flood, a hurricane that has impacted part of the United States like this one has. So this will be a fluid process, but please know that our office is there. We work very closely with Commissioner Meyers, not only on issues like this, but any number of other legislative issues. It's a very, very good working relationship that we have, and we are happy to be able to provide that service, and look forward to hearing whatever needs that you might have. Thank you.
lost your job as a result of the flood, you're temporarily out of work, are looking for something a little more permanent. We have HGAC's workforce career program. I believe they're outside. So if you need some assistance in that area, there's somebody available. You can contact them and they can assist you in that. One of the things I wanted to do now is bring up Mark Grant, who's going to tell you a little bit about our debris removal effort. So Mark.
We got to stop meeting like this. Well, most of you know the drill. There's a few new faces, it looks like. We have started with the debris removal in this area. We're close to being finished with the first pass. Obviously that we've picked up around 20,000 cubic yards in this area. Last year total was 50,000 cubic yards. Total in the county is 160,000 cubic yards. We're estimating 500,000 cubic yards. So, as you can imagine, it affected so many more individuals this year compared to in the years past. Most of you residents know what we do and how we do things. After the first pass, you know that the second pass will come. Obviously, everybody needs to bring everything up to the ditch or to the curb line like we have in the past. The white goods, the HHW, the e-waste, the television sets and such, so to be picked up in the process, typically after the first pass, maybe after the second, between the third. But we'll get it all cleaned up like we have in the past. And I know everybody in here is tired of having to deal with this. I'm tired of having to go clean it up, to be quite honest with you. So I feel for you guys for the second time, I really do. And that we're going to take care of you like we have in the past. So thank y'all.
We have Lucy Garcia, who is with the U.S. Department of Labor here. Lucy, you want to explain a little bit about how you can help the people?
Yes, sir.
All right, come on up.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lucy Garcia with the U.S. Department of Labor's Wage and Hour Division. We're the agency that enforces federal minimum wage, overtime, child labor record keeping. We've noticed there's lots of questions that we're receiving regarding some employees that might not have received their last paychecks. Some employers that are saying, my business was destroyed, or, my employees are displaced, how do I find them? What are my responsibilities on how to make sure that I pay them properly? We're the agency that you can contact to help you out with those types of questions. Also, we are seeing some people that are doing some work, some day labor work, trying to pick up some work, and not getting paid. Those are also some questions that we can help you with. So we'll have our materials in the back. So if you have any questions or running into those types of situations, please contact us. We also have some fact sheets that provide you some names and phone numbers regarding unemployment questions and things like that, some agencies you can talk to. So we have those numbers, and I'm actually out of the Austin district office, and I'm on detail here to cover the Houston area, and so I have their direct numbers to both Austin and to Houston. So just want to let y'all know. Thank you very much.
As I mentioned earlier, the Congress did appropriate several $1 billion to help. That is a drop in the bucket whenever you look at the impact that Hurricane Harvey had on the entire state of Texas. Consequently, your local government, Judge Hebert, leading Fort Bend County delegation, Dr. John Zarwas, the other Texas state reps and state senators, Olson's office, and the rest of the Texas delegation are all working together to make a plea, if you would, alongside the Florida delegation for funding to help the victims of both Hurricane Harvey and Hurricane Irma. What Dr. Zerwas is, as chairman of the House Appropriations Committee, is actually having a hearing Monday, the October 2nd, in which his process is to try to assimilate information with regard to how much money we're going to be needing in Texas so that we can make ask for the correct amount. We certainly don't want to ask for too little. So we're in the process. Obviously, it takes a little bit of time. We understand the frustrations. We have some questions that we'll be answering that are on point on this issue. But I do want to now bring up Mark Vogler, who is our drainage engineer, who can give us a little bit of background with regard to the Brazos River, with regard to how we ended up with the flood that we ended up with, and what possibly we can do to help mitigate future events. So, Mark Vogler.
Sorry about that, folks. I broke a foot. I want to start off by saying I was really impressed with you folks. I've never seen a crowd with that many people having flood insurance percentage-wise. If I didn't know better, I swear I was in a flood insurance agents convention or something here. First of all, I want to talk about the river just a little bit. We had a record flood on the river in recent history. I think there were floods prior to including 1913, prior to this, before any reservoirs were built on the river. And there were some flood levels that exceeded the one we saw. But since the 1913 flood, this is the historic high flood as it was measured in Richmond. About the river flood, in 2014, we just readjusted the floodplain map for the Brazos River. The county put in $1.2 million to assist FEMA in remapping the Brazos River through Fort Bend County. We took LiDAR, where we flew over in airplanes, not we, but somebody flew over in airplanes, shot laser beams on the ground. We got new ground data. We resurveyed the cross sections of the river and got a restudy on the river. What we've been noticing since the early 80s is the river at the Richmond gauge has been getting higher and higher water levels for lower and lower flows, or for the same flows. You remember, some of you have been here, the 92 flood, the 94 flood, those were pretty big floods. And the river, for the flows they were actually measuring, were 3 feet higher than it was supposed to be, according to the rating curve. The rating curve is this little ruler we use when we do the model to see if our model's any good or not, to see if it matches historic floods that have actually occurred. And that rating curve, it was changing up at that time. And it's continued to change since that time. We were on rating curve 12, and going to rating curve 13 back in 2004, 2005, and today we're on rating curve 17. So through the history of the Brazos River modeling and measurements, we've had 17 rating curves. 5 of those have come about the last 10 or 15 years, which is surprising why it's rising so fast. Some of it we think is due to, we haven't had these big flushing floods like we've just recently had, so we're seeing a lot of vegetation growing along the banks of the river and slowing the flow of the water down. Instead of water flowing at 6 or 8 feet per second, it's flowing at only 4 or 5 feet per second. Well, to calculate how much or how high the water is going to get, it's just an area times the velocity of the water. If you slow the velocity down, the area obviously has to get bigger, which is the water getting higher. So that's what we've seen to some degree. But we also have some questions about the measurements that are being taken in Richmond by the USGS. Not that they're right or wrong, we just want to investigate that some. They're using new technology. And so we have a technical committee that the Commissioner's Court and the judge have asked us to pull together with some very educated engineers that are very knowledgeable in this area. And we are reviewing that information to see if there needs to be further adjustment to the river floodplain or if there are some things that have been done in our calibrations that are no longer valid and we need to make additional adjustments for those things. So we are looking at the river flood adjustments and then the modeling. As you recall, the 2016 flood, we had set a modern record then. I think the water got up to, at the Richmond gauge, 54.7, 54.8. This flood was just a little bit higher. At the Richmond gauge, it's 55.2. If those numbers don't make any sense to you, I can tell you why, because there's an adjustment factor you have to add on to that. The gauge at Richmond is 27.02 feet above sea level, and you have to add this 55.2 on top of the 27.02. You have to add those two numbers together to see how high the water is above mean sea level. Now, you folks up here in Fulshear and Simonton, your water is even higher than that. If you add the 55.2 to the 27, you're coming up with about 82, 83 feet above sea level at Richmond, right at the river bridge. But your floodplain up here on the river is 103 to 115 to 117 at the county line, so it's much different. The water runs downhill, flows downhill, and so as you go further downstream on the river, the floodplain elevation gets lower. We have a floodplain map on not only our website, but I think the engineering department has it on their website. Go to those websites, they're interactive. You can type in your address, it'll show you where you live at, it'll show you the cross sections of the river. It has little red lines going across the river every so often. The red lines have a number. That number is the elevation of the water above sea level. And then you can also zoom in on the maps, and in our particular map, the LiDAR, the ground contours will show up, and then you can discern how deep you are in the floodplain or how high you are above the floodplain. With that being said, I want to talk a little bit about the creeks and streams. The main creek that comes through the Sound and Fulshear area, it has about 3 different names that I'm aware of. One's Hattie Creek, one's Fulshear Creek, one's Bessie's Creek, and I don't know how you all refer to it. And that had been a Zone A floodplain for many, many years. The Drainage District has easements on that channel from a distance upstream of Pool Hill Road all the way down to James Lane. We have some scattered easements below James Lane, but we don't maintain those because that channel is so erosive that if we pull the trees out, we're going to have a problem down there. But with that being stated, that had been a Zone A floodplain. It was just an approximate method. They just showed a shaded area and it showed it all floodplain. You had no idea how high the water was or how deep you were in the floodplain. And so the county had requested that FEMA do a study to determine what the real floodplain was, create a Zone AE on that floodplain. And I think I saw Elizabeth over here. Thank you. She was the one that participated very much in that study. And you now have a floodplain. You can tell how high or low the water is in your property. And again, on our maps, the ground contours do show up. You can tell how high you are in relation to that floodplain elevation. With that being said, this particular storm we saw was unusual. Our typical floods, you either have a flood on the Brazos River or you have a flood on Fulshear, Bessie's, Fulshear, or Hattie Creek. In this particular one, you had a flood on everything. The river flooded from local rainfall as well as upstream rainfall. So we had this peak flood coming down the Brazos River, which, by the way, some of that water from the Brazos spills over upstream of the Valley Lodge area and gets into Bessie's Creek and continues that path down in through Fulshear and into the river just south of Fulshear. And then we also had this tremendously large amount of rainfall in our watershed. Our channel, I'm going to call it Bessie's, or Fulshear Creek, excuse me, that's the typical name I use. Our channel is designed for agricultural runoff. That's about 2 to 3 inches of rain in 24 hours. This land was all agricultural when the Drainage District was formed. And that's what the commissioners at that time determined was necessary to facilitate this area. And obviously there's some development occurring. And so what the county's policy is, new developments have to show that with their development in place, they don't increase the peak runoff in the creek, in Fulshear Creek, at any point downstream. They can either do it by modeling. If they don't have modeling, which means they're less than 50 acres, or they choose to use a more simplified method, we restrict their release rate to 1/8 of CFS per acre. And to give you an idea what 1/8 CFS per acre would mean, if the whole watershed detained their water and released at only 1/8 cubic foot per second per acre, that would pretty much cause the floodplain on Bessie's Creek, Fulshear Creek, to recede to within the banks of the channel. There would almost be no floodplain left. So those folks that use that method, we tax them very hard with the detention rates. Now, that being said, that's for 12.5 inches in 24 hours. That's a one-day storm, assuming the ground is dry when the storm begins. And when that storm is over with, all the water drains out on its own. There's no subsequent rains after that. This event wasn't like that at all. We had an initial, the first day's rain was fairly significant. It may not have been a 100-year, 12.5 inch rain, but it's very close to that. So it charged our whole system full of water. The detention ponds, the creeks, the low areas, they're all full of water. Not only that, the ground is saturated. So any more rainfall on that ground in subsequent days, you're going to get 100% runoff because there's no more place to store the water. It won't soak in the ground because the ground is saturated, and that's exactly what we got. We got a large rain. It was on Friday, late Thursday night, early Friday morning, and then pretty much all day Friday. We got a subsequent rain on Saturday that was significant, another rain on Sunday, and when I say another, it was very probably continuous except for a few breaks between the clouds. And I think again on Monday we had some additional rain. So this rain was far beyond a 100-year event. Our channels functioned as they were designed. Again, they're designed for agricultural runoff with 3 inches of runoff, and you have a 12.5-inch rainfall causes some floodplain to exist. So we had a floodplain to begin with, and this far exceeded that. Our planning policy, as I described, we require detention for all developments unless they can get their water into the creek and show in their modeling that the water can get out into the Brazos River before the slug of water comes from the upstream watershed. If you go to our website and look at the floodplain mapping, you'll see upstream of Pool Hill Road, there's a significant constricted area in there where the water is really prevented from coming down below Pool Hill Road at a really extreme rate because of the natural barrier that are caused by high ground. And so there are some developments that are coming in below that restricted point. We're trying to get them to get their water out as fast as possible so that this other water has an opportunity to come down and use the same channel without holding the downstream water back and forcing it to have to drain out on top of the upstream flooding. With that, I'm going to turn it back over to Commissioner Myers. If you go to the Fort Bend County website, in the engineering department is the same website. You go to the Fort Bend County website, middle of the page are buttons you can go for departments. You can click on any department you want. You can go to the engineering department, just scroll down, or you can go to the drainage district. We're in the center column about halfway down. When you get there, you can look at an interactive floodplain map. That's one of the buttons on the left. There's a series of maps that show you ground contours. One of them is the 2014 LIDAR, which is the most recent one we have, and I'd be happy to give you more information on that after the meeting if you'd like.
The website, for those of you who haven't called it, obviously you can Google Fort Bend County. It's fortbendcountytx.gov, FORTBENDCOUNTYTX.gov. You get there, you'll see departments. Under departments, you'll have all the departments of the county, but particularly you'll have the engineering and the drainage district department. You click on either one of those and go to the left-hand side. They have a column that has maps, floodplain maps, etc. Click on that, it'll give you the information. If you put your address in there on the floodplain map, it will tell you the elevation of your house and whether or not you're in the floodplain. So, with that, one of the things that, am I forgetting something? Am I forgetting someone up here? Our engineering department. I forgot their engineering, how could I do that?
Just real quick, on our website, as Mark said, we have a map that you can type in your address. It will tell you, number one, are you in the 100-year floodplain or the 1% chance floodplain? If you are, you need an inspection from our department that is different from the FEMA inspection. We will come in, do an assessment of how much damage. You will then get a letter. It tells you whether you're substantially damaged or not. That's going to put you on different paths on what you have to do from that point forward. My staff can explain that after you talk to them. Phone number for the engineering department is 281-633-7500. They will look up your address for you if you don't want to do it yourselves. They will put you on the list to get the inspections done. And that'll be the fastest way to get through this process. Some of you that had to go through it last year have already called us, gotten on the list. We just want to get that information out to as many people as possible. I'm sorry, my name is Rick Stagley. I'm the first assistant county engineer. S-T-A-I-G-L-E. But whoever answers the phone, whether they'll take it or kick it to one of the other staff members, we've got 6 or 7 staff members that are doing this continuously all day long. The number of calls that we are getting, but we will. The wait time is not going to be like it was during the event. The phone should be answered very quickly. Sure, 281-633-7500.
Thank you. Briefly, I wanted to touch on what Fort Bend County has done with regard to your property taxes from the county and our drainage district. 2 weeks ago, Fort Bend County Commissioner's Court authorized a reevaluation of all of the homes that were impacted by Harvey, the hurricane. If you had flooding or other damages to your home will be supposed to be automatically reviewed. If you find out after, they can't do it immediately, but they will do it in a short period of time. You can contact the Central Appraisal District of Fort Bend. Central Appraisal District. The Central Appraisal District is not part of Fort Bend County. It's an independent entity that operates under their own state law. They're the ones that have the responsibility of valuing your property for tax purposes for all taxing jurisdictions. Every taxing jurisdiction that can levy a property tax has the option of doing what Fort Bend County has done, and that is ask for a reevaluation of property values to lower the property taxes for that period of time that the home was flooded. So late August through the end of the year, this year, and then obviously next year until everything is fixed and back to proper order. So Fort Bend County, to my knowledge, in the drainage district, and it turned out that there's one mud and Cinco Ranch that have requested the Central Appraisal District to make those adjustments. We continue to talk to the other entities to see if they will do the same thing. To my knowledge, they may have, but to my knowledge, they haven't done that yet. It doesn't mean that they will not do so, but they haven't done it yet. Your county taxes, for most county taxpayers, amount to only about 15 to 16% of your tax bill that you pay. Most of your taxes go to your school districts, and if you live in a mud, to your mud district. So the portion of your tax that the county levies is a fairly small percentage. So it's not a total. You want to tell me something? Okay. Lost my train of thought. I'm sorry. We do have environmental here. A lot of you are on septic systems and water wells, and there's some specific health issues that you need to be aware of. So we want to bring our environmental health up where the there he is, walking up. Okay, tell us everything you know.
Okay. I'm Gary Ganna. I'm the Chief Sanitarian of Fort Bend County. And for those of y'all that are on water wells and septic systems that may have been affected by the flood, we want y'all to take the time, really want y'all to test your water well, do the sampling on that, make sure you're getting a clean sample back. We have the sample bottles available here. They're available at the Fulshear City Hall and our office in Rosenberg. We have the instructions. It's a simple process to test the well to make sure that you're going to not have a contaminated water well and drinking safe water. Some people, when it comes back bad, they have to, well, it has to be disinfected and cleaned. So it might be a multi-sample situation, but that's very important. We really need to check our drinking water supplies. For the septic systems, or aerobic systems, some of y'all have the new aerobic systems, some have the old septic systems. If you have an aerobic system, let me address that first. That's probably the easiest to have is have your maintenance provider, your service provider come out, check the system out. They can determine if it got some inundation with some of the silt and other stuff washed down through the floodwaters, and they can be pumped out to protect the mechanical components inside of it. They can check to make sure your aerator, your air compressors, as sometimes called, is working and all the electronics are working. And they'll let you know, they do a good job with that, and they'll let you know what it's required to fix it if it's necessary. As far as an old conventional septic system, if you're lucky enough to still have one of those, but it wants one of those. If they were sealed properly, they should be okay, but the same thing, you would really never know. It might not be a bad idea, once everything's taken care of, to have a wastewater pumper come out, check it out, see if you have an excess buildup of sludge or silt in there, and they'll suck that out for you. That will keep that from, as you use your system, flowing downstream into your field lines and clogging those up. Basically filling your field lines out in the soil with dirt, which is just going to make you get an aerobic system, so we don't want to do that if you don't have to. So that's about what I have. If there's anything else I can add, let me know, or I'll be out there after the thing. I have some water sample
Has everybody got their questions in? Okay, thank you. We're going to go to the question and answer period now, and we'll wrap up again with regard to the specific issues that you have. You can contact FEMA. They've already explained you've got to get a FEMA number, etc. The best thing for you to do is to go to that recovery center that's in the community, Simon Community Church area, facilities to get your specific individual questions answered, and they will answer. I'm going to introduce Hugh Durlow, who is a resident of Canyon Gate. Canyon Gate was one of the hardest hit areas. We had homes, almost every home in Canyon Gate flooded, and some of them fairly severely. Hugh's own house flooded almost 2 feet in his house. He's had that experience. Dr. Zerwas has already explained he had about 1.5 feet in his. I actually had a small amount of water in my home. I ended up losing my wood floors in my big family room. So we've all been hit by this, but Hugh has a list of questions that have been submitted, and so he's going to be asking the panel here some rather pointed and tough questions. That's the reason I'm not asking them. So in any event, this is Hugh Durlow.
Thank you, Commissioner Myers. Thank you guys for coming out here. I know we have some questions that are going to be on the PowerPoint. Robert, did we get those put on the PowerPoint, the questions? Or are we just reading what's on the cards? So I'll go ahead and start with some of the questions that have been submitted. Or are they up there? I can't see the PowerPoint. Let me stand over here so I can get a better look at them. So, they're not up there. That's where. So it's not just me. You guys aren't playing with me, are you? Oh, okay.
Go ahead and go with one more.
Okay. So one question, and whoever can answer this or feels best qualified to answer this, please step up. We've got the microphone over there, and then there's a microphone that you guys can pass around. But when is the levee going to be built, and can you give us details on that? What levee? This is why you guys need to be a little bit more descriptive.
I'm assuming that's coming from the Simonton Valley Lodge about the levee. And, up until recently, FEMA did not fund levees. There's been some change in that. And of course, the city could never afford one on their own. But you may or may not be aware that the governor has established a commission called Rebuild Texas, and the head of that commission is the chancellor of Texas A&M University. We've met with him on 2 occasions, and one of the offers us some grants out there for flood mitigation. And so the city has been working with our city engineers and looking at different mitigation projects, and we have to submit that by next Friday, the 29th, and we have a list of those. I have to say to you that a levy is one of those items that we're going to request. The governor is going to take that information. We have to put them in priority one, and we have to put an estimated cost. The governor is going to take all of that from not only our area, but the entire county and other counties in Texas, and bring that to Washington and see if he can get it funded. So we are looking at a levy for the Simonton area and for Fulshear, for Valley Lodge in specific. So whether we get it or not, that we don't know, but it is on our list, and it's our #1 priority at this time.
Another question was asked about the levee. One of the things that Fort Bend County local officials, together with Missouri County, have been advocating for some period of time is another large reservoir north of here on the Brazos River, somewhere around College Station, LaGrange, that area, to detain the water on the Brazos River. The 15 flood was caused not because we had rain here, but because we had rain in central Texas, and it came down the Brazos River and flooded everybody. So a large reservoir in that area is something we've been advocating for. That's a Corps of Engineer project, and we obviously have to work through the Corps. You've got some very stringent environmental requirements and a lot of other things. One of the things that we're advocating, both the local governments, Dr. Zerwas and the state government, as well as our Texas delegation, is asking for a waiver of some of the environmental requirements, environmental studies that have to be done, because that's a 15 to 20-year process. We don't have that long, frankly. I've been doing this for 20 years, and so far I've been through 4 floods. I don't need any more. And so we are working diligently to try to get the federal government focused on the fact that we needed to fund these projects so that we can quit flooding our residents. That is one of the things that we're working on. The restrictions we've had in the past have been 2. One, environmental requirements, and the biggest one being funding from the federal government. They've never appropriated the funds. There are other reservoirs in the area that have been on the books for some period of time, since the late 80s, that simply have never gotten funded. Unfortunately, sometimes you have to have an event of this nature in order to get Congress to move forward, and so we're advocating for that as we speak. So I want to get that out there also. They got flooded by 35 to 55 inches of rain. The reservoir is impacted another area out there. But unfortunately, we simply had a biblical portion rain here that has never occurred in our knowledge in the United States. That is what flooded everybody. I don't know how you go about protecting against that. The only thing we can do is mitigate against that. We designed things for a 1% chance of a flood in the area. That was a 0.0001% chance that would have occurred. So to say that they flooded as a result of the reservoir is unfortunately incorrect. They flooded as a result of 35 to 55 inches of rain. So we'll continue with the question.
When will the buyout take place? And this is from a resident of Valley Lodge. When will the buyout take place? Do we have an update on that? And the next question, I guess, would be, what's the status with the Tetra Tech grades, I believe? Okay, I'm sorry.
So, after the 2016 flood, there was a call for applications for buyouts within the floodplain area. Those floods happened in May. The call, or the opening of the grant, was October. Closing was December. Here we are in almost to October of 2017, and we're being told it's at least 6 months before we know the result of the 2016 money. Therefore, any money being granted out of this flood, I have to tell you, you're looking at 18 to 24 months before we know whether there's going to be any money available for buyouts. It's an unfortunate answer. It's just the process that is going through. Fort Bend County is just learning our way through that process now. We've been relying on Tetra Tech, who is our consultant, to help us through this, because they've helped other counties or other agencies get through that process. At this point, we don't know for sure whether there's going to be a call for buyouts. If there is, we will be contacting the people in this area to see if they want to be on that list. It is a voluntary program. It is not a mandatory program. We will not be condemning property for a buyout. So that's the information I can give you at this point in time.
How will Allen Creek affect Simonton? How will Allen Creek?
I have no idea. Mark?
I'm sorry?
The Allen Creek Reservoir. I don't know if we can answer the question. The Allen Creek Reservoir, which is in Austin County, just across the Brazos River from Fort Bend County, is really too small and too shallow to be a flood reservoir. Actually, Allen's Creek Reservoir was specifically purchased. Originally, it was going to be a water supply for a electrical power plant. The city of Houston, together with the Brazos River Authority, have purchased the Allen's Creek Reservoir for the purpose of surface water storage. So it's not a detention basin. Whether or not the city of Houston builds that or not, I can't answer that question. To date, they've had plenty of opportunities. They have not. They have other water sources north of them that they can draw on. They believe that for some long period of time, they will have sufficient surface water supply from their existing surface water reservoirs. I don't think that they have any immediate plans for the Allen Creek Reservoir, but that's the city of Houston.
Yeah, but doesn't it take away about 6,000 acres of where the Brazos goes out into whenever it comes up out of the bank?
I tell you what, I will answer your individual questions after the meeting, but I can't answer the question with regard to Allen's Creek, Fort Bend County. First of all, it's not in Fort Bend County, it's in Austin County. Second of all, we have no interest in it. It is owned by the city of Houston and the Brazos River Authority.
What are the rules going to be for repair or rebuild in the unincorporated areas of Fort Bend County?
That goes back to that inspection that I said you need to call engineering office for. Once we get your damage inspection, it will be determined that value versus your home value. If it is less than 50% of the home's value, you will be cut loose at that point and you can make your repairs. If it is over 50%, you are what we call substantially damaged. At that point, you will need to bring your home into compliance with the current regulations. That might include raising that structure to get that finished floor elevation above the base flood, the 100-year flood elevation. The grant we talked about buyouts, the other part of that we applied for in 2016 would actually assist residents in paying for raising that structure. Depending on whether you're a slab on grade or a pier and beam, determines how much that effort costs. It can be fairly reasonable, it can be very expensive. Also check your flood insurance policy. Some of them have what's called, it's ICC.
Increased cost of compliance, yeah.
Yeah, increased cost of compliance, which can assist with paying for raising that structure.
Pays up to $30,000.
Okay, up to $30,000.
Right. It'll cover, if you have flood insurance through NFIP, and your house is determined to be substantially damaged, the cost of repair as adjusted through your policy, additional $30,000 will be made available for you to come into compliance. It doesn't raise your limit. In other words, if you have $250,000 and you have $250,000 worth of damage, you're not going to get any additional money. But any additional money left in your policy, up to $30,000 can go towards that elevation and meeting the new compliance. So if you have flood insurance, another kudo on you.
I have a question about that, though. Doesn't that $30,000 come with stipulation for forever purchase flood insurance? Forever and ever?
Yes.
Okay, we need to know that.
If you accept most grants involving FEMA money, there's a requirement to obtain and maintain insurance related to the risk that caused the damage. Flood insurance is the most popular one, but also if you had wind damage and you received a FEMA grant, you're required to obtain and maintain insurance to cover for that peril.
Can someone from FEMA speak to performing repairs while waiting for inspection?
FEMA advises all of the survivors, if you waited for repairs, to make sure that you go ahead and try to get your house safe, sanitary, and functional. Do not just sit and let, I had a couple of questions earlier today at the last meeting where some of the participants, they wanted to know if they needed to wait until the inspectors came to inspect their property. You do not have to wait until someone comes to inspect your property. Please go ahead and start doing the repairs if you can and make it safe to live in. Just make sure that you document, take plenty of pictures. If you have to purchase products from Home Depot or other places, make sure that you keep your receipts and just have everything well documented for the inspectors when they come. Also, I'd like to say something about when the inspectors come, they will have a ID such as we all wear. An inspection is free, so if someone comes and say, I need to be paid for the inspection, and you're so anxious to get your property inspected because you waited for a long period of time, do not fall for that because these inspections are free. And right now we have over 2,000 inspectors in the state of Texas right now that are here working on your behalf, trying to work as expediently as possible in order to get to your property. So just please bear with them, it takes time. While I'm up here at the podium, I'd like to say we have some FEMA, DSA, disaster assistance representatives. They're out in the foyer. If there's something that's on your FEMA profile that you're not sure of, if you've gotten a letter, something, whatever is holding up your process, they can look up, have your registration number, and they can look that up out there. And also I want to say, make sure that you don't just get your FEMA letter and if it says denial, think that that's it, you have no recourse. You do, because sometimes this FEMA letter, when it says denial, it just simply means that you need another piece of paperwork or something that you have to present. One last thing, we do have we have 2 locations in the county. Okay. You have 2 locations for disaster assistance offices in this area, because once we leave today, you still probably have questions and you want to go back and check your profile and you may not can get online. So you have one in the Simonton Community Church, which is open 7 to 7. It's closed on Sundays, and that address is 9703. Because I think 3 people or 2 people said that they had registered. Is that right? Okay, 1 person. So you can also see someone here at the Simonton Community Church, and also we have Sienna Annex. That's at 5855 Sienna Springs Way. That's in the county of Missouri City. Yeah, that's right. Oh, okay, the Katie Mills Mall. Let's see if I have it on here. Oh, Katie. I printed this off Wednesday.
It's Katie Mills.
Oh, here it is. Here
Pretty
it is.
easy.
Okay, the Katie Mills Mall. It's just simply 5000 Katie Mills Circle. I'm sure all of you all know where the mall is, right? And that's Harris County, Katie Mills Mall, 5000 Katie Mills Circle.
I'm going to need to ask for clarification on your comment because the county has been told we cannot tell them to begin any repairs until they have had their substantial damage review from the county. That you can gut it out, clean it up, dry it out, but before you start any other repairs, you need the damage assessment from the county. Because my agency, the county cannot tell you to start repairs without that, or we will get dinged from FEMA when we get audited. They are 2 separate entities. Correct. Absolutely. If you have flood insurance, it is part of the flood insurance. Otherwise, it's an individual assistance.
That flood insurance, we don't pay, flood insurance is not paid in this place. 25 days of a FEMA motel. That's gone from here in the next few days. I'm back on my property living in a trailer, and should I expect any compensation from the county or the federal government for those costs incurred where I'm living right now on my property or not in my home?
I can only speak for the county. There is no additional compensation.
Let's address one question at a time if we can, just to make sure we don't lose anyone in the process. So, as you mentioned, the transitional shelter assistance, which pays for hotel stays because you can't be in your home at this time, that has been extended at the request of the state of Texas until October 24th. At that time, Texas will reassess, and in many situations, states ask for another 30 days, and so on. In the meantime, that's the immediate way to get out of a home and get into someplace in the hotel. So, people who are already in the hotel now should be receiving a robocall in the next few days. It's an automated system saying, can you return to your home or not? Press 1 or 2, that sort of thing. There will be a small number of people who will be denied a renewal. Those people are people who have been identified as having a second home, and this is not their primary residence, so they have a home to go home to. And there was one more exception. Oh, yes, the inspector has already been to your home and has determined it is safe for you to return. Those people will not be extended. But if you are not one of those two situations, you should be extended for another 30 days. By registering with FEMA, then you are on the list. There are 800,000 people who have registered with FEMA.
281-633-7500. You need the FEMA inspection to determine whether you can go back in the home. You need our inspection to determine whether you can start repairs. So you might be able to gut it out, you've got electricity, your air conditioner's back on, and you're willing to live in there without the sheetrock. The county's not going to stop you from doing that. You just can't start putting up insulation and sheetrock and things like that until we give you our letter.
So can those inspections be done in any sequence? Do I have the county before I
It doesn't matter, whichever one gets there first.
Hey Rick, I was just going to make sure we clarify the county inspections for substantial damage are only going to be in the special flood hazard area, okay?
Correct.
So if you were flooded and you're outside of the 1% floodplain, there will not be an inspection. It is only in the SFHA.
And you can still call my office, 281-633-7500. My staff will look up your address, tell you whether you're in the special flood hazard or not. If you're not, you can just move forward as far as the county is concerned. And if you want that documented for your records, they can send you an email to that effect. I don't believe Weston Lakes is here. And
That's a city.
I believe they're, you're your own floodplain manager, correct?
With Weston Lakes, they have to fill out a permit request, and then as long as you got that backside, it goes on.
Yeah, because Weston Lakes is its own city.
All right. Let me say for the residents in Simonton, so it doesn't get too confusing, you all went through this exercise last year, so you know the drill. And so the same, it's very similar to what the county said, the unincorporated areas in Simonton Valley Lodge, the flooded area. You do your remediation, but you cannot proceed to do any other construction until you come to City Hall and apply for a permit. And then we run that by our city engineer, and he makes a determination, because our city engineers are also doing the inspections. They're going to do the entire three inspections this year. And so we've got to better coordinate with the last year. And so they will go through that exercise, and once they determine whether you're 50% or more or less, and if you're less than 50%, you'll be issued a permit, and then you can go on with construction. But you cannot proceed after you do your remediation. You cannot proceed to do any work until you got a permit and approved. As far as FEMA and what FEMA inspection does, they'll just come out on their own, but we just handle it the same way we did last year.
Mayor, I have a question. I have one question, Mayor.
Yes, sir.
So with the chapter 14 of the EPJ assignment, is that every city assignment or every county?
No, that's for the unincorporated area. Yes.
Okay, I have Chase Wilson here with Social Services to talk more about housing options.
Good afternoon, everyone. I know we kind of transitioned back to home repair and everything, but I think we had a question about living expenses earlier in temporary shelter while everyone's rebuilding their homes. I'm with Fort Bend County Social Services. Our department right now is assisting with the basic needs of those affected by the flooding and the disaster. We offer several assistance types, food assistance, utility, medication, rent or mortgage assistance, as well as emergency shelter. The shelter that we offer, it's a temporary shelter, 1 to 10 days. I understand that that's, you may need something much longer than that. We do work with several agencies around the area though, and we offer extensive case management services to help through the long-term recovery process. We have several other agencies that we work with that may also be able to provide shelter as well, and we work closely hand in hand with them. So while our temporary shelter may not be lasting, we may be able to transition you over to another agency that may be able to offer a little bit more supplemental shelter in that case. Our food, we offer food assistance, rental, mortgage assistance, utility assistance, and medication assistance as well, just to take care of some of those basic needs while everybody's getting back on their feet. I'll be outside. I have a little table set up. I have some information, so if anybody would like to come and if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them for you. Thank you.
All right, our next question is, what options and plans are being considered to prevent future flooding of homes? Are we looking at widening of bayous, deepening of reservoirs, any other options? Can anyone speak to that?
Again, Mark Vogel with Fort Bend County Drainage District. We have just reestablished the floodplain maps, and we don't have any plans for channel improvements on Fulshear Creek at this time. We're requiring all developers to restrict their releases from their developments to existing conditions or prove they don't cause an impact downstream by releasing at a faster rate than would have naturally occurred. Those requirements have been in place since 1987, and we continue to use those. As long as we have a 12.5-inch rain or less, the system functions very well. When you have an event like this one, which far exceeds that design, we do have a problem with some flooding. There is a limit to what you can design for. If the county chooses to start designing for 500-year floodplains, that's something to consider, but we would have to do that countywide. It would be a very significant impact to the community as a whole. Well, the benchmark is you don't increase the flood above the existing conditions. There's computer models on the screen, like we were talking about earlier. Elizabeth Levitz and some folks created a model for Vestige Creek, Fulshear Creek, to show how much water flows down the channel in a 100-year event, how high the water would get. So any development that comes in subsequent to that model, they have the option to take that model, put their development in that model, show they don't cause an impact. If they cause an impact, they've got to provide sufficient attention to eliminate that impact. If they choose not to use the model, then they use that simplified method that we had, as I said earlier, requires a release rate of an eighth of a cubic foot per second per acre. Very restrictive number, would actually reduce the floodplain, and I can assure you that would not cause an impact in a 100-year event. And as I said earlier, when you get an event more than a 100-year event, the detention pond's full. We do typically require a 1-foot freeboard on the detention pond, so there's a little bit of wiggle room in there. But in the rain we had, the detention ponds would have filled up, the drainage system would have filled up, and we would have overtopped everything. feel like it would be unreasonable to try to design for a storm of this magnitude that we just had. I'm not absolutely familiar with all the residential areas in Weston Lakes, but Pecan Lake, for instance, if you dredge Pecan Lake deeper, but you keep the water level in the lake at the same level it is today, you provide no more storage in that lake than you had prior to dredging it out. Because the deeper you dig it, you'll just store more water at a deeper depth that can never drain out of there. Does that make sense?
One of the things Fort Bend County did, when did we clean out the detention ponds in Weston Lakes, Mark?
It was a few years ago, 3 or 4 years ago, I believe. 3
or 4 years ago, Fort Bend County, the detention area, detention lakes, and detention ponds in Western Lakes had silted up to the point where they were about 50, 60% of their original capacity. Fort Bend County spent several $1 million as a request of the mayor of Western Lakes to go in and clean all that out. Had we not cleaned that out, unfortunately, a lot more homes would have flooded. So we're doing things of that nature that we can do where we have the ability to maintain our existing flood control system. However, in order to expand the system, which is really one of the things that is needed, you have to go through these laborious, very expensive, time-consuming environmental studies. Must be approved by the Corps of Engineers. The Corps, in some instances, refuses to allow you to make those improvements because you may impact a prairie chicken habitat, for example. We were denied that. So there's a lot of restrictions that the federal government has put on us. One of the things we're trying to do is get the Texas delegation to get changes to federal legislation to allow local governments and the state governments to address the local issues so we can prevent some of this. We are hamstrung by the federal government in too many instances. This is one of them. So your long-term solution is the reservoirs that we mentioned earlier and improving the downstream flow so that we can get the water to the Gulf of Mexico a lot quicker than we do. It not only impacts Fort Bend County, it impacts all the other counties around here. So we're working together on that issue, but we don't have a solution, mainly because of the federal government. Unfortunately, it takes, as I said earlier, it takes an event of this nature to spur the Congress to take the correct action to address these issues. So that's the long-term solution to the deal. Short-term, Fort Bend County has the most restrictive requirements on flood control that is allowed under the law that I'm aware of, and within not getting sued by developers who would claim adverse condemnation of their property should we put too many restrictions on them, and that's a lawsuit we lose in court in the state of Texas. So there's a balance here that we're trying to reach. Again, this was a flood of biblical proportions, 35 to 55 inches. That is unheard of in the United States. That is what we have been dealing with. It's not possible to address that issue with modifications that we're able to do with the funds that we have. The Drainage District levies a tax of 1.6 cents per $100 value. That works out to about $3 a month that you pay. To just give you an example.
Regarding Simonton, again, what are we doing about the flooded situation? Short of getting a levy, the only thing we can do is lift the houses out of there. And a very large percentage of those houses are slab houses, and they were built years ago when floodplain elevations were lower. In 1994, there was a flood there, and the Corps of Engineers did a study and found out that it probably wasn't a 100-year flood, it was probably more like a 10-year flood. And so they knew that the base flood elevations were too low. It was after, it wasn't until 2013 where FEMA came out with new base flood elevations. And the base flood elevations in Valley Lodge increased substantially, anywhere, depending on where you're located, from 2.5 feet to 4 feet. And of course, putting slab houses on mounds that are 4 feet high, and we do have one, that creates some problems. So after the flood last year, the first council meeting after the flood, the city council said that, one can build those come down because it creates a lot of problems for your neighbors, and it takes up volume in the area, and you get swelling if you have flooding. So what happened after 2016, we have a couple of houses that were slab houses that the owners elevated. We had other owners who tore down the houses, their existing houses, and built pier and beam houses. And none of those houses flooded this year in 2017. So the appeal, one of the appeals we'll be making, and when we address this, when we do this thing for the Rebuild Texas, is one of the items is that we got to have, the only thing we do is the way that grants are offered, and as I said earlier, the grants have not come through, and we don't know when they're going to come through. But and I understand the priorities that the people who have, the residents that have 50% or more should get higher priority. But I really think we appeal to FEMA that everybody who wants to elevate those houses, because we have so many of them in the subdivision that are down a very large, probably the maximum, largest percentage of them out there were built many years ago at those floodplain elevations that were wrong. And so again, what we've done in the last council meeting after this flood here, the city had the city's requirement was that you build 1 foot above the base flood elevation. We've increased that to 2 feet above to give some more free margin in case of a flood. I'm sorry? Okay. So what we've done is we've increased the base our city requirements from 1 foot above base flood elevation to 2 feet above base flood elevation. But those are the only things, short of getting a levee, that's about the only thing we can see that we can do to prevent flooding out there, is just raise the structures. And we need some support to do that.
This is going to be directed to FEMA and SBA. Is it required to apply for the SBA loan before receiving a FEMA grant or your FEMA funds?
No, absolutely not. In fact, we encourage you to apply immediately and start the process. We had 3 ways to apply. The quickest right now is through our website, and that's disasterloan.sba.gov/ELA, which is electronic loan application, but ELA. Disasterloan.sba.gov/ELA. As mentioned before, you could also go to any of the disaster recovery centers in the county or anywhere else in the disaster area and apply there and talk to, we have SBA personnel at every disaster recovery center with FEMA. And if you're really stuck, you can call and request a paper application. That's the slowest process, but for some that's that's okay. We do that. We have an 800 number, 800-659-2955. That's a number where you can check, get questions answered, check on the status of your application at any time. 800-659-2955.
And I want to reiterate that question. You do not need to apply for the SBA loan to receive your FEMA grant money. Because I think I got a different answer at the last meeting.
No, I thought the question was, do you need to wait to apply?
No. The question was, do we need to apply for the SBA loan to receive our FEMA grant money?
It's part of the sequence of delivery. You apply with FEMA. They may help you with some initial funds, and then you may be referred to the SBA for a loan application. That's an essential part of the sequence. You need to then apply and let us make a loan decision. If you're approved, that's your form of recovery. If you're not approved, then we can refer you back to FEMA for possible additional grant assistance.
All right, I'm going to rephrase one more time. If I apply for FEMA and do not apply for an SBA loan, will I get grant money?
That's not my experience. I mean, that's not been.
Can I have someone from FEMA please answer that?
I mean, I'm saying that's no, I'm answering no.
You're saying no, okay, so we need to apply for the SBA loan in order to receive the FEMA.
Yeah, that is not the case. So FEMA grants, there are different tools. It is all a process. So we encourage most people who register with FEMA to apply with the SBA. There are some people who we automatically know will not qualify for SBA, but we really ask most people who register with FEMA to go ahead and put in an SBA application. There are funds available even if you don't apply with the SBA, but there are other funds available once you have applied with the SBA. So, what disqualifies you from an SBA loan from FEMA, if all of your needs are covered by your insurance, then FEMA does not duplicate anything. That would be an example.
All right, I think we got an answer on that.
Sorry, can I just offer another example? If your flood damage was in your secondary home, FEMA does not cover that. Yeah. Just 2 examples.
If on the original plat it showed that our subdivision was prone to flooding, whose responsibility was it to make? Sorry, it's hard to read some of this writing.
That won't apply for this area.
That won't, okay.
That was a Barker Reservoir
Write a
question.
subdivision on here, sorry. I found a couple of Canyon Gate questions in there that I'm trying to filter out through. Santa Plantation. Okay. The bill.
So we do have people from Barker Reservoir flooding? Okay.
Okay.
To disclose that information.
Yeah. Okay. If on the original plat it showed that our subdivision was prone to flooding, whose responsibility was it to make it known to the buyer that they were prone to flooding?
When Canyon Gate, those areas over there were being originally platted by the developers, it was not in the 100-year floodplain, the 1% chance. The county actually, according to the developers, exceeded its authority by requiring those notes that basically said, this neighborhood is subject to inundation from the Barker Reservoir. The county had that note placed over the objection of the developer to try to notify the buyers that this was a possibility. I was down with the county at that time. The staff at that time's understanding was that would then be a disclosure at the property closing done by the title company. Due to this event, we've been told by real estate lawyers that that is not a required something that they have to disclose at the closing. So we're being told that none of the buyers were told about that plat note in specific. Do you have additional, Commissioner? But as far as who's responsible, the county had no authority to go beyond what it did.
One of the things I want to make clear is that those of you who live in the unincorporated area of the county, that really is the great majority of you, particularly those in the Single Ranch, Canyon Gate, County Wood area. You live in the unincorporated area of Fort Bend County. Counties do not have the same level of authority that a city has with regard to requirements of notice, requirements of permits, building permits, or any type of other permits. We have very limited authority with regard to development in the unincorporated area. That is a decision that the legislature has set multiple times. We've worked with Representative Zerwis' office to try to change that without success. The developers always are able to defeat our efforts. Texas, a private property rights state, the legislature takes the view that if you own the property, you should be able to do, basically what you want to do with it, as long as you don't, quote, negatively impact your neighbor. So with regard to the ability of counties to require any type of permits or restrict any kind of development, we do not have such authority. If we move forward to try to do that, we would be sued and we would lose that lawsuit in a court of law. So Fort Bend County and any other county for that matter in the unincorporated area simply does not have the authority under state law to address those issues.
from Texana Plantation. The buildup of lid communities around Texana Plantation has designated it into a floodplain. Additionally, growth has caused flooding from Jones and Brazos to inundate the homes of Texana Plantation. How can you protect us from our problem that can happen at almost every heavy rain?
As I said earlier about the Fulshear Creek, Message Creek watershed, we have the same requirements throughout the county. Every development that comes in has to analyze what their impact would be in storms up below and up to a 100-year event, which is 12.5 inches in 24 hours. And so we require them to either use detention to show they don't cause impact, or use the models to show that if they do use detention, the water can get out to the river without causing an impact. The floodplain on the Brazos River, as I said earlier, has gone up as a result of vegetation, and the rating curve has changed. We're not absolutely sure what other factors could have affected that rating curve besides the vegetation. We have a technical committee reviewing that. I, the other day, was talking with some folks at Texana Plantation. I went back and pointed out to them that if you look at, they were saying the levee district downstream were constricting the flows. Well, the 92 flood, the 94 flood, the 98 flood, the 2007 flood, none of those flood waters touched the toe of any levee district. They were all confined pretty much within the banks of the river or just slightly outside the river, and yet they were 3 feet higher than the rating curve that had been derived by USGS represented them to be. That being said, we also measured the width of the river at the railroad bridge there at Richmond, and just north of 98 in Richmond. That width was about 750 feet wide from one high bank of the river to the high bank of the river under the railroad track. If you go down to Fort Bend County Lid 10 and Fort Bend County Lid 7, they're right across the river from each other. That's the most restricted point downstream from Richmond that people are claiming caused an impact. The distance between one levee on one side of the river and the other levee on the other side of the river is like 1,700 feet. So it's more restricted at the railroad bridge, and you got this railroad embankment built up above it, than it is any point downstream where the levee districts are existing. So there are levee districts being placed. They were allowed to come up to the floodway boundary, which is somewhat restrictive. That was our policy back from 1987. It was right in line with FEMA's policy. But since that, we have realized that there is an impact, and could be an impact that could damage upstream property owners, so the county has changed their policy. Our policy now in Fort Bend County for the Brazos River is you can't build in the floodway, which is FEMA's rules, but even beyond that, there's an area called the effective flow boundary. We don't allow any development, levee district, house, barn to be constructed in the effective flow boundary of the Brazos River without mitigating your impact. That same policy is implemented on all streams in the county, as well as the Salmon River. And above that, on the streams in the Salmon River, if you put any fill in the floodplain, not the floodway, the effective flow boundary, but even beyond that, in any part of the floodplain, you have to mitigate the impact of your fill in that floodplain where the water is being stored. And so that policy change has been implemented and should prevent any further impact that levee districts and development within the floodplain have caused in the past.
Thank you. It seems like with the explosion of development going on around here that, these new master plan communities are mitigating their water, but that water goes into these older watersheds and waterways that weren't necessarily meant to handle that much water. Is the county looking at slowing down any of that development, or looking to increase the watersheds or waterways to handle that?
As I mentioned earlier, counties have no authority under current state law to restrict any kind of development. If you own land, you have the right to develop it under Texas law. Texas is a private property right state. You have the authority and the ability to develop your own property. Counties can't require you, cannot restrict you from doing so. We can require you, as Mark has pointed out, Mark Vogler has pointed out several times, that you have to detain the water in your development and release that water at no faster than the original natural flow rate, undeveloped flow rate previous to the development. So the developments that come in actually are going to be providing a lot of detention and I can't say in most instances, but I know in a number of instances the engineers over-design, if you want to call it that, the capacity of the detention, because if they under-design it and somebody floods, they obviously have liability for that. So they want to make certain they have a little bit of a margin of error. So the reality is that oftentimes they will over-engineer to make certain that they are detaining the water, the proper amount of water. The county, other than that requirement, and we only can do that through the planning process, so the only time we have an opportunity to do that is when the developer comes in with a plat to plat his development. At that time, we can make those requirements. Other than that, we have no ability to restrict anybody from any kind of development.
And one other additional information on that is all the criteria is based on the 1% chance, the 100-year flood. Mark, correct me if I'm wrong, if you get a 32 to 50-inch rain, we've exceeded that rainfall event. Therefore, those detention ponds were overflowing in many of these neighborhoods because it was just a rain that we have not seen before.
So what are you going to do about it?
As far as I know, we don't have the authority to go beyond the 100-year flood.
The only clarification to that is under the floodplain administration that Fort Bend County uses now, if an individual comes and is going to build a home in a floodplain, they have to design that flood or that home. Let's say they're going to put some fill dirt in there, and they're going to fill up some floodplain to raise their home up. They have to mitigate that impact. If they fill up an acre of land by a foot to raise their home up, where's that acre foot of water going to be displaced to? So we require them to create an acre foot of storage somewhere else in their property to mitigate that impact. And then with that being said, there were a number of homes on Cummings Road that were damaged in the 2016 flood, and those homes were on the ground when they were substantially damaged. They were in the floodway of the river, so they had to rebuild, but they had to rebuild to FEMA standards, which means they had to be, in the Fort Bend County standard, which means their homes had to be elevated at least 18 inches above the 100-year floodplain end, which means you got to build it on stilts, pilings, or you got to put this fill in there. And a number of them have come in and tried to build these earthen mounds to raise their homes up, required significant mitigation. Some of them, the mitigation was so significant that they couldn't do it. They ended up having to redesign and put their homes up on stilts.
But that is a county requirement to offset the displacement of water when you build a 5-foot high mound and put a 5,000 square foot home.
Not only the displacement of water from storage, but also the blockage of water from being able to flow if it's in the effective flow boundary or the floodway.
Are the levees downstream in South Fort Bend, south of 59, causing the river to flood upstream around I-10 and Simonton?
No, the impact from those levees, and again, as I said earlier, when we got the flood insurance program, levees, obstructions, barns, homes could be built up to the floodway boundary. The county was in lockstep with FEMA on that requirement up until 2014, or actually I think 2011 is when the drainage district changed their criteria amendment. So under the original rules, a levee district, a home, barns could be built all the way up to the floodway boundary of the river. And that would could in effect raise the level of the river 1 foot at that point. But if you raise the river 1 foot 7 miles downstream of the Richmond Bridge, it's not going to affect Richmond, it's not going to affect Simonton, it's not going to affect Interstate 10. That impact tapers off as you come up a couple miles upstream from those impact areas.
This question here kind of rings with me as well. When will I receive the initial $500 emergency funds that I was approved for by FEMA? And I want to ask this as well because I've not only had my house inspected by FEMA and received my FEMA money, but I've never received that initial $500 emergency funds when we evacuated our house.
So those $500 are what we call critical needs assistance.
Right.
And that is assessed on the day you register. And so 4 weeks after the disaster, it's no longer a critical need assistance. It's meant for the immediate aftermath of a disaster. And so when you registered, you should have been asked at that very first time, or when you first logged in to create your profile, to click the box for critical needs assistance. If you did not in your initial registration, you will not be receiving $500 from that critical needs package. If you have a question believing that you did in fact check that box, then we'll need you to speak with either the DSA teams here or someone who can pull up your profile and look at it.
Thank you. I'm gonna find you. Is there a mitigation elevation grant for repeatedly flooded homes 3 times in 2.5 years? When will funds be awarded?
Currently, the window for the flood mitigation assistance program it's right now, and the FMA program, I believe that's what Mayor Boudreaux was talking about. You do have to have an active policy for NFIP to participate in that program for flood mitigation assistance. So that is a criteria. Another criteria, if you are participating in it, you can use and choose to elevate. You're an RL property, which is repetitive loss. You can use ICC, increased cost of compliance, to help with your local cost share. Outside of that, again, as we mentioned, there are some some hazard mitigation assistance grants that will be made available that are tied to this disaster. The state is going to administer that grant. It's going to be estimated 15% of the individual assistance and the public assistance value tied to the grant. So it may take a little bit to find out how big the pie is, but I know that the Fort Bend County Recoveries and the Recovery Committee are looking at those. Maybe Jeff, if you could talk about long-term recovery here on this.
Just one thing to add in terms of individuals that are looking for assistance. There's things other than FEMA assistance, and outside you'll get there's a pamphlet there on the group called Fort Bend Recovers. That group is a long-term recovery group that formed last year after the 2016 event, and they are working to, they're there to work with everybody. They have a case management program where there's a phone number that's on the pamphlet that you can get that will give you a case manager that will help you kind of work through the process of what might be available outside of the FEMA structure, but also work to get your answers about FEMA if you're getting frustrated with that. There's also a repair and rebuild group, and that's what was being talked about. They're working actively to acquire monies and to develop processes to help in the rebuild for those that may have not qualified for FEMA assistance or have some other issue. Please get that pamphlet. That group is very active. They're working, talked with a couple of the jurisdictions before the meeting. They're setting up little groups in each of the jurisdictions that were really affected to try to build some ability to bring the Fort Bend Recovers folks. It's basically 38 to 40 nonprofit groups that are working together to work out here to assist the survivors of the flooding. So outside on the table, Fort Bend Recovers, it's just a one-page pamphlet. It'll be at the emergency management desk out there.
Thank you. Do renters or other members of the household, such as adult children, qualify for SBA loans, or are these loans exclusive to the homeowner?
No, if you have someone living in your home that's renting, their personal property would be eligible for an SBA loan.
Okay, but the renter would not be able to apply for an SBA loan for
their... No, the renter that's in the home would be able to apply for their personal property losses.
Okay.
Yeah.
How does FEMA audit the expenses later? Does the sheetrock and paint work and total composite contract has to be shown separately? Sure, how that's worded. Total cost of repair. Anyways, does FEMA, are they going to require receipts or inspection of any of the work that's done with the grant money? I think that's the question they're trying to ask.
As a general rule, we ask people to take pictures of everything that's being done and to capture all receipts associated with the home repairs that they are trying to get FEMA grant money associated with.
All right, that's all the questions we have for now, and thank you guys so much.
Thank you. We just had a A news release, Hurricane Harvey survivors still needing hotel stays get an extension. Some of the Hurricane Harvey survivors who need more time to find housing are getting an extension to stay temporarily in hotels while they look for an alternative place to live. The Transition Sheltering Assistance Program, which pays for the short-term hotel stay, has been extended by 14 days. The new checkout date is October the 10th. That just was released. So I want to get that to you. That is our program for today. If you have some individual questions, we'll be up here. If you have some, yes, you have a. Questions, we'll be up here to try to answer them for you. One of the things I do want to remind you of, I got a mobility bond issue that I need some help on. My 1093 project has been stalled a little bit. We'll start the second phase. It starts at 1463 going west here by the end of November. But I got a lot of other roads I need some help on, so please, November election, we have a bond issue. With that, thank y'all for being here, and I want to thank my panel here for all of their help in answering the questions.